All right, so this is a debate that Answering Adventism had in May of 2025. And at the 2 hour and 35-minute mark of this video, he starts taking audience questions, and up there on the screen is my question, which simply says, to the Seventh-day Adventists, theoretically, if you're promoting a false prophet on the Sabbath, would you be breaking the Sabbath? So, this is a debate between a Baptist and a Seventh-day Adventist on the Sabbath, and it's about do Christians need to keep the seventh-day Sabbath, right? So, and my question is very, very innocent, right? I'm saying theoretically. I'm not calling Ellen White a false prophet. I'm just saying theoretically. uh, um, if you were promoting a false prophet on Sabbath, would you be breaking the Sabbath? So let's see what he has to say.
This person says to Jose, theoretically, if you were promoting a false prophet on Sabbath, would you be breaking the Sabbath?
Yeah, I'm assuming you're wanting to deal with the Ellen White question. That's a debate for another time. The only thing I'm going to say to you is the debate is whether or not she really is a false prophet. Now, obviously, the arguments that my opponent would say yes, and many others would do the same thing. I would differ with that under the gift of prophecy, the talents given. But I do believe that if a prophet is a prophet of God, they're going to speak according to God's word. Of course, the problem is we don't all agree right now, as you can tell, on what God's word actually is saying. And so obviously that's going to be the lens by which some of us are going to say true or false. And so that's something we all have to study out and be honest with God for ourselves.
Now, note, he did not answer my question. He just dodged it. Why? Is there something in your heart that's telling you that, oh, I can't answer this because deep down I know she's a false prophet? That means I am breaking the Sabbath. That means I would have to leave this church. Why couldn't you just give me a simple yes or no? See, to me, there's something wrong there. And he just dodged my question. But let's see what the Baptist says.
All right. Thank you, sir. Tony, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would agree with the premise that, if you're promoting a false prophet on Sabbath or whatever, let's say the Lord's Day on Sunday, would you be breaking the Sabbath or the Lord's Day? Well, yes, you would.
See, very simple. That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted from the other guy. Why couldn't he say it? Don't you understand the Bible? It seems like they don't even understand the Bible. Because remember the Sabbath commandment. It's like everyone just seems to focus on rest or going to church. It doesn't just say that. It doesn't even say anything about going to church on Sabbath in the Bible. You know what it says? It says rest and keep it holy. And because they are resting, they also meet with each other on the Sabbath. But basically, that commandment says you got to rest. You're not to make anyone else work, and you are to keep it holy. That's a big thing. So you can't be breaking commandments by promoting a false prophet on the Sabbath.
And so any promotion of a false prophet is sinful to God because it's apostasy. It's the Deuteronomy 13, 1-5. It goes.
Okay, and is sin keeping the Sabbath holy? No. So if sin is not keeping the Sabbath holy, you are breaking the Sabbath, correct? I think Jose might be shaking his head yes to this, though.
On to say that if anyone amongst you turns away from the Lord under the Mosaic law, they were to be executed for apostasy under the Mosaic law. Thank God we're not under that today. But I think apostasy was a federal crime under the theocracy of God with Israel. So yeah, I would agree with the premise. But you could also be a heretic and keep the Sabbath. There's a lot of Sabbatarian groups out there. There's the Armstrong cult, and again, with all due respect.
Now, he just contradicted himself. You can't be a heretic and keep the Sabbath, because if you're a heretic, what are you probably doing? Probably sinning in some way. Dude, you were originally right. You should have kept it there. Okay? And then, but see, now he got all happy. Like, didn't he just give a thumbs up, Jose? I think that's what the Seventh-day Adventist's name is. Did he just give a thumbs up when he said that? Because if so, that's probably what Jose believes. Yeah, we can be heretics, we can lie and everything, and still keep the Sabbath. Is that what you're saying? Was that your real answer, Jose? Hold on, I gotta replay this.
On Sunday, would you be breaking the Sabbath or the Lord's Day? Well, yes, you would. And so any promotion of a false prophet is sinful to God, because it's apostasy. It's the Deuteronomy 13, 1-5. It goes on to say that if anyone amongst you turns away from the Lord under the Mosaic law, they were to be executed for apostasy under the Mosaic law. Thank God we're not under that today. But I think apostasy was a federal crime under the theocracy of God with Israel. So yeah, I would agree with the premise. But you could also be a heretic and keep the Sabbath. There's a lot of Sabbatarian groups out there. There's the Armstrong cult. And again, with all due respect, Jose, the Seventh-day Adventists are a cult just as much as Armstrong and all the other Sabbath.
Huh. That was weird. You know what? I never, because when I'm listening to this whole thing, and I didn't get a chance to actually watch the video until now. This is the first time I saw it visually. I didn't realize Jose, when he was saying when the Baptist was saying you can be a heretic and keep the Sabbath, Jose is smiling, nodding his head, and giving a thumbs up. Actually, you cannot be, but Seventh-day Adventists believe that. That's weird, right? Man, that was very curious to me. I did not notice that until I rewatched that just now. Wow. So, but the real answer, the Seventh-day Baptist had it right at first. The Sabbath commandment is to keep it holy. All right. So you got to not only rest, not make other people work, not even your animals work. You let everybody rest, and you keep it holy. That means you're not committing sin on the Sabbath. You're not definitely not breaking the commandments on Sabbath. And I don't see how someone that's an actual heretic, I think you would have to be sinning in some way to be a heretic. So I don't see how you can be a heretic and keep the Sabbath. So when Jose gave that thumbs up, I mean, is that what Seventh-day Adventists really believe? Because that's not really true. You can't be a heretic. And I keep Sabbath for people who don't know me. I do, observe Sabbath. That, in fact, when I went to the Seventh-day Adventist church, I did it because I didn't feel like driving 50 minutes to my church. And I didn't know nothing about the Seventh-day Adventist church when I started going to it. And so I went with it into it in an open mind. But when I was told I couldn't be a member because I thought Ellen White was a false prophet, I had issues with them, especially when I asked them for proof of things like their calendar dating and things like that. And this has been an ongoing thing for several years now, where I have tried to reach out to them, and they go, "Well, we give you an answer," and they never have given me an answer. There are clearly things that she taught that are false and that they have no proof of, but yet they are scared to have a public conversation about this stuff and answer my questions publicly, but yet they'll kick you out of the church for it. And they'll say, "No, you can't be a member. You're crazy. You're a bad person." And they'll do that to you. And they'll be like, you're evil. You're out to get us." And it's like, whoa, 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 calm down here. How am I out to get you when I'm just asking for proof and trying to understand why you even believe this stuff, right? Like, why do you believe October 22nd is the Day of Atonement? Just because someone told you it is? Because there's no proof at all that the eighth day of the eighth moon of the year can ever be the Day of Atonement, because that would be the 8th month, and the 8th month is Cheshvan. It's not Tishri, and the Day of Atonement has to happen in Tishri. Not only that, you don't even have proof that these so-called Karaite Jews, which is what they claim like this group of Karaite Jews are the ones who were keeping the true biblical calendar. Well, they have no proof that a single Karaite in the world observed the Day of Atonement on October 22nd. Sounds like they're doing nothing but lying. Not only that, they're going by the astronomical new moon as the first day of the month. You don't go by the astronomical new moon, you go by the crescent, the sighted moon. Almost any body who keeps the feast days knows that, right? You always go by the crescent moon. The sighted crescent moon, unless it's after the 30th day of the month, and then you automatically would assume, you automatically say, oh, it's going to be the first day of the month, right? But that wasn't the case in October. So not only is it the wrong month, you're also starting at like when there's an astronomical new moon. And it would never be started on the astronomical new moon, because the way the calendar's set up, the first day would never fall on an astronomical new moon. That's just not how it works. I'm not going to go into great depth, but that's crazy. It's more like if you couldn't see it, like let's say there was an astronomical new moon, and then the next day you still couldn't see it, that would probably be the 30th day, right? And then the day after that would be the first day, right? That's how this whole thing works. It doesn't like, so the way they're reckoning it can never be reckoned that way. So they're off on two accounts. So I just want to read something right before I go, because it's a post I wrote in response to this also. I said I asked a simple question, a theoretical question in the chat. If a church promotes a false prophet, are they breaking the Sabbath? So I wasn't, no accusations, no names, just a logic-based question. But the SDA speaker couldn't answer it directly. Instead, he deflected, giving a vague answer about categories of sin and covenant signs without ever saying yes or no. And that's curious, because if you believe your church has nothing to hide, you would just say, yes, of course. If a church follows a false prophet, they're not honoring God, and the Sabbath is a sign of loyalty to God, right? But he couldn't say that. Why? Because deep down, he likely realized if he answered honestly, he'd be implicating his own church. If he denied the logic, he'd be redefining what Sabbath faithfulness actually means. It was a quiet moment, but it exposed a crack in the foundation, because the biblical Sabbath isn't just about resting on the right day. It's a sign of allegiance to the true God, Exodus 31:13. And if your church is following a false prophet, you're not honoring the Sabbath no matter what day you rest. And in Ezekiel 20, verse 16, it says, they polluted my Sabbaths, for their heart went after idols. A false prophet is an idol, okay? Because you're putting the place of that false prophet, you're putting the words of that false prophet in the place of God, claiming that that false prophet's words are the words of God, right? Because you're saying that false prophet was given these words by God, and and now that false prophet's a vehicle of God's words, right? So that false prophet then becomes God, because it's not coming from God himself, it's coming from that false prophet's imaginations, right? So now that false prophet is an idol. That's why you're breaking the first and second commandments. And you're actually breaking the commandment about not keeping the Sabbath holy. And you're also breaking a commandment about stealing, because if people give to your church, that you're now doing it under the guise of fraud, because they think they're given to a true church, helping a true church, but you're actually a false church, because you're promoting a false prophet, you're promoting an idol, and therefore you're receiving money through fraud, which is theft, right? So again, Ezekiel 20, verse 16, they polluted my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols, right? And that polluted my Sabbath. That's what God's telling you. See, that's not a theory, that's scripture. So I just want to make sure I don't have one more point to make. You know what? I think I'm just gonna. Okay, I did write a letter to Miles, and I would kind of like to read it, but I'm just gonna. Okay, so anyway, many Sunday defenders, especially in public debates, sound like they're just arguing for convenience over conviction. They talk about working on Sunday, flipping on light switches, or how they just feel peace about, keeping Sunday or whatever, and not having to worry about the Sabbath. But to someone watching with a sincere desire to obey God, that comes across as weak, compromised Christianity. Meanwhile, the SCA quotes the Ten Commandments, appeals to Jesus' examples, and says, we want to obey the fourth commandment too. So who sounds more faithful in that moment? The result, viewers walk away saying, even though I'm not sure about Ellen White, these SDA folks are the only ones who seem serious about honoring God. So you gotta be careful about how you guys come across when you do these debates. And so that's how the trap gets sprung. This is why I believe attacking the Sabbath itself is not an effective strategy, because you guys constantly, come out not sounding that great, And the only people really cheering are people that are kind of like, they're just emotionally tied to wanting to be right, and they're not really listening to how this is coming across to people. And it backfires. It reinforces the SDA position. It makes the Sunday defenders look like they're against God's law. You want to be careful about not doing that. The better way is just this question I have up on the screen, because I keep the Sabbath, right? And you know why I steer away from this church? It's not because of the Sabbath. It's because, well, actually, it is because of Sabbath. But I can see that they break the Sabbath. So if I go to that church, I'm complicit in promoting the breaking of the Sabbath by supporting it. So I can't go to that church. That's why I'm trying to get people out. But I don't care about the people who want to be Seventh-day Adventists and they want to break the commandment, and they don't care about the Sabbath. They're like, oh, we love breaking the Sabbath. That's great. Go stay in the Seventh-day Adventist church if you love breaking God's laws, right? If you love polluting God's Sabbath, stay in that church. But my point is, I think it would be a better strategy to go after this one question, because if she's a false prophet, they're breaking the Sabbath. So they need to take and make their congregation and people like me who visit their church with an open mind, they need to give us reassurance that she is a true prophet. And instead of running from our questions about Ellen White, say, oh, no, we got nothing to hide. We'll have an open discussion, because there's something wrong when you won't have an open discussion, but you're willing to run people out of your church who ask a question that you don't even want to answer publicly, but yet you're willing to drive them out of a church. There's something wrong. That's crazy. You're part of a cult if you're like that. See, that isn't that what the Catholic Church does? And I think they're a very large cult. All right. Isn't that what Mormons do? Isn't that what all these other groups do that are considered cults? Don't they try to censor your speech and control everything? They're very controlling, right? What do we see here? Oh, very controlling. Won't answer a question. Wants to make sure. Strangle him. Don't let him talk. Don't let him talk. Don't let his words on. Because I get banned. I got banned from the Advent Defense League for commenting on their videos. Right? They won't let me comment. Because why? Tough question, Chris. We don't want to answer that. We got to control the narrative, right? That's cult. That's a cult mentality. So, and if you really care about the Sabbath, and you guys actually want to attack the Seventh-day Adventist Church and expose them, then this is the way to do it. They need to prove that they're not breaking the Sabbath, that they actually do care about the Sabbath. Because this debate doesn't even matter if they're breaking the Sabbath, right? This debate it makes no difference, isn't relative if they're already breaking the Sabbath. right? Because he's already showing that deep down inside, he doesn't care about the Sabbath, because he doesn't care if he's breaking it, because he doesn't care if he's promoting a false prophet or not. That's the attitude of everyone in that church. They only care about Ellen White. And I wish Miles would get that through his skull. They only care about Ellen White. They do not care about the Sabbath. Prove me wrong. If you care about the Sabbath, let's start having talks about key issues about Ellen White. And these questions should not be dodged about Ellen White, because like I think I have logically laid out why that's breaking the Sabbath. And you guys should both admit that if you're promoting a false prophet on the Sabbath, you're breaking the Sabbath. The Bible clearly says you are polluting the Sabbath by promoting your false idols, right? So here's the irony. You don't have to argue against the Sabbath to expose the SDA church. You only have to prove this: the SDA church doesn't keep the Sabbath because it promotes a false prophet. That's it. Game over. I asked a question during a recent SDA versus Baptist debate. If a church promotes a false prophet, are they breaking the Sabbath? The SDA apologist froze. He couldn't answer. Why? Because the logic was too tight. The Sabbath is a sign of loyalty to the true God, Exodus 31:13. Promoting a false prophet is promoting a false spirit, Deuteronomy 13:1 through 5. That means you're not keeping the Sabbath, you're polluting it, Ezekiel 20:16. So the SDA church doesn't keep the Sabbath. It violates it every time it exalts Ellen White as a mouthpiece for God. That's the argument no one's making, but the one that actually works. It dismantles their entire identity as Sabbath keepers, and it makes any debate about which day irrelevant. So that's the key issue right here. It dismantles their entire identity about Sabbath keepers, right? You got to admit, that's their identity. They identify as being Sabbath keepers. So if you just go, oh, no, you're not, because you're breaking it by promoting a false prophet, that's what the debate needs to be. Not this. Not should you keep the Sabbath? What day is the Sabbath? And it shouldn't be none of this. None of it. Stop playing around. Like sometimes I wonder if Miles is controlled opposition, because it's like, why are you even elevating them to people who could possibly be keeping the Sabbath or possibly even care? The true thing we need to ask is that their identity as Sabbath keepers prove that you're not promoting a false prophet and not breaking it, and you're not a bunch of liars. Let's see if they even care about the Sabbath in the first place. Don't just assume just because they talk about it a lot. There's lots of people that talk about Jesus a lot, and I don't think they really care about Jesus, but they sure talk about him a lot. Sure talk about it. Some even say they love him, and I kind of really doubt it. But they sure talk about him and sure say it a lot. And I think here's a good case of it right here. As these people, they're, the Sabbath's so important. Okay, well, if it's so important, can you please show us that you're not breaking it by promoting a false prophet? See, I think that could be the big satanic deception right here, is that here's these people that want to trick people into breaking the Sabbath and not keep it holy. Yeah, so basically, I say we just stop giving them the high ground by pretending that they're Sabbath keepers, and that this is a Sabbath versus Sunday issue, because it's not. It's a truth versus deception issue. And it's like, are you actually Sabbath keeping if like this one question? We know this is the answer to this question. Theoretically, if you're promoting a false prophet on Sabbath, would you be breaking the Sabbath? Everyone should answer yes. You definitely are. Okay. Now you need to answer the questions. So people like me who visit your church don't just start yelling at us and go, get him out of here, he's crazy. He's out here to attack us. He asked a question, and stop acting crazy. Like they get crazy like that. Like, oh, he asked a question. He asked a question. What is that? No one acts like that. No one does. You guys are the only people that act like that. That's crazy. No, calmly. Be calm. Answer the question. Be confident. Like, no, we're definitely not. What's your question? We will definitely answer this in front of everyone. We will go on to any show and we will confidently answer these questions. We care about the Sabbath. We certainly do. And we're certainly not Sabbath breakers. We will answer that question. We can show you that. No, Ellen White definitely is not a false prophet. Ellen White definitely did not lie. Ellen White, when she said her writings are not of human production and that these testimonies are 100% of God, we can definitely stand by that and prove it. And she's not lying. All right. Like you guys would definitely and say, no, we're not running people like Chris Lucas out of the church for simply questioning that. We're here to confidently answer that and show that, no, we're not lying. No, we got all these reasons why we really believe it. That's what they need to do.